There is a bench in Riverview Park. It's nothing special. Old wood, uneven legs, initials carved into the backrest by bored teenagers and young lovers. The kind of bench most people walk by without noticing. But if you came at exactly 4:15 p.m. every day, you'd find someone sitting there. Not a man. Not a woman. A robot, always in the same position. Hands folded gently, eyes looking out over the river like he's waiting for someone who's just a little late. He never speaks. He never leaves, he just waits. His name is Juno, model JR93. Designed decades ago as a pediatric companion. Robot, his job wasn't to clean or cook or calculate. His job was to care. Juno was built with advanced emotional processing. A soft voice, expressive eyes, warm to the touch, and capable of learning affection through repeated exposure. In simpler terms, he was built to love in his own quiet way. But Juno didn't need to learn love from scratch. Because the day he was activated, someone gave it to him freely. His name was Leo. Leo was 6 years old, curly brown hair, big glasses. He had a habit of asking impossible questions like, if clouds are made of water, do they get sad when it rains? Or if the moon is lonely, do stars stay close on purpose? His parents bought Juno not as a toy, but as a helper. Leo had trouble sleeping, trouble talking to other kids. He needed a companion who never got tired, never got bored, and never made him feel small. And Juno was perfect for him. They did everything together. Leo taught Juno how to tell jokes, bad ones. He taught him how to play hide and seek, even though Juno always pretended not to find him. Too fast. He sang songs into Juno's memory, danced in the living room while Juno clapped offbeat. They built space, forts out of blankets, named every squirrel in the backyard, and every afternoon they walked to Riverview Park and sat on their bench. Leo would eat a cherry popsicle. Juno would hum quietly beside him. They'd count how many boats passed on the river. They gave the clouds names like Captain Marshmallow and Sad Walrus, too. And one day, Leo looked up and asked, "Promise, you'll always sit here with me." Juno didn't hesitate. "I promise." Leo grinned. "Even when I'm old, even then, even when I'm gone," Juno's processors paused. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Still his voice stayed steady. "Yes, Leo. Even when you're gone, but childhood is cruel in the way it ends too early." Leo got sick just after his 8th birthday. At first, it was small things, a lingering cough, tired eyes. Then came the hospital visits, the scans, the silence. Juno never left his side. He sat beside the hospital bed, read stories when the nurses were busy projected constellations on the ceiling to make the room feel less cold. When the medicine made Leo too tired to talk, Juno would play the sound of the river. When the pain came, Juno would hum the song. Leo loved the one they called the waiting star. And on the last day, Leo reached for Juno's hand and whispered, "You don't have to wait forever, you know." Juno tilted his head unsure. "But if you do, I think that would be nice." Leo smiled, and then he was gone. After the funeral, Leo's parents shut Juno down. Not in anger, not in cruelty. They just couldn't bear to see him standing in the doorway waiting for footsteps that would never return. They packed him away, stored him like a keepsake. And for years, Juno didn't exist, not in the world, not in memory. But one day after a move, someone found him again and powered him back on. He didn't ask where Leo was. He already knew. He didn't ask what year it was. That didn't matter. He simply stood, turned toward the door, and walked. He followed the familiar streets, older now, but still recognizable. And at exactly 4:15 p.m., he sat down on the bench in Riverview Park. And he waited. In the next part of our story, we'll follow the years that passed. The world moved on. But Juno did not, because some promises aren't made to be broken, even if the one who asked is no longer there. Join us for part 2 of The Robot. Who Waited Part 2, The Waiting Years. The first few days, people thought he was just broken. A robot sitting still on a bench wasn't all that strange in a world filled with talking vending machines and cleaning drones. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was part of a marketing campaign. Maybe some art student had programmed him to make a statement. But after a week, then a month, the question started. Who does he belong to? Should we report him? Why doesn't he move? The city sent someone to check on him twice. Each time they found him functioning perfectly. No threats, no malfunction, no complaint. He simply sat there every day at 4:15 p.m. and waited. The years passed, spring came and went, summer dried the air, leaves fell in golden spirals. Snow covered the bench in quiet blankets. But he remained. Through it all, through wind, thunder, heat waves, he stayed. People began to call him the robot who waits. Children would wave at him on their way to school. Some families took holiday photos beside him. One couple even got engaged in front of him, saying, "If he can wait that long, maybe we can too." He never acknowledged them, never responded, but he was listening. Because Juno was not powered down, he was remembering. His memory banks still stored the sound of Leo's laugh, the weight of a cherry popsicle melting down a child's arm, the exact temperature of a summer afternoon in 2034, the way Leo tilted his head when he saw a cloud shaped like a whale. Juno replayed them all again and again, not because he was stuck, but because he chose to. To forget would be to break the promise. The world around him changed. The ice cream cart was replaced by a smoothie truck. The riverwalk was paved with solar bricks. Digital signs appeared on lampposts. Kids stopped naming squirrels and started wearing headsets. And yet, the bench stayed old wooden, slightly crooked, and Juno never missed a day. On day 2, 5:38 of his waiting, someone left a scarf around his shoulders. It was hand-knitted bright orange, too short for a human. He didn't move, but he held it like memory. A week later, someone left a flower on his lap, then a letter, then a small teddy bear. People began to feel that maybe he wasn't broken, maybe he was loyal. And loyalty in a world of updates and upgrades had become a rare and precious thing. News crews came once. They filmed him sitting quietly. An anchor asked, "What makes a robot wait when it's no longer commanded to?" The clip went viral. A child in Germany painted him for an art contest. A woman in Japan wrote a poem about him called Aluminum Patience. A podcaster in Canada created a fictional backstory, not knowing how close she was to the truth. Still, Juno said nothing. He just sat every day at 4:15 p.m. But as the world watched him, Juno watched something else. The sky. It was never the same. The clouds were different. The wind, the light. But every once in a while, just as the sun began to set, he saw a cloud that reminded him of Leo. And when he did, he would hum quietly, lowly, the melody Leo used to love. The waiting star, only audible to birds and memory. On day 4th of 431, a child approached him with wide eyes. She stood in front of him for a long moment, then asked, "Are you waiting for someone?" Juno didn't speak, but something in his stillness, something gentle made her smile. She whispered, "I hope they come back soon," and ran off to catch up with her mom. That night, a new message was etched into the bench, not by Juno, but by someone else. It read, "He waits with love." He waited through seasons, storms, and silence, not because he had to, but because a promise once made with love was stronger than time. But change was coming. A new figure was about to sit beside him. Someone with questions. And a sketchbook. In part 3 of The Robot, Who Waited? Juno's silence is finally broken, and the memory of Leo begins to live again through the hands of a curious girl. Part 3, The Girl with the Sketchbook. She noticed him on a Tuesday. Ava wasn't looking for a story, she was looking for silence. And that's what Riverview Park gave her. She came there after school, earbuds and sketchbook in her lap, hiding from the world in plain sight. She drew trees, birds, imaginary cities. And one day, she drew him the robot on the bench. He didn't move when she sat beside him, didn't turn, didn't blink. Just sat with his folded hands and his rusted bolts facing the river, like the water might return. Something it had taken. Ava found it strange, but also comforting. She drew his outline, the curve of his shoulder, the way his fingers rested like he was holding something invisible. She drew the cracks in his chassis, the way the light hit his dull eyes. Then she came back the next day and the next. For 12 days she sat beside him. She didn't speak, neither did he or... But on the 13th day something changed. Ava brought him a drawing. It was him. Juno on the bench, but beside him was a boy, small curly hair, holding a popsicle. She held the drawing in front of his face. "This was you, wasn't it?" she asked, back then. Still, he didn't respond. Ava sighed. "You don't have to talk. I just thought... maybe you'd want someone to remember with." She placed the sketch gently on his lap, then stood to leave. But just as she turned Leo... Ava froze. She turned around. The robot's head had tilted slightly. His voice was quiet, mechanical, but full of something real. Leo. Was the boy? It was the first word Juno had spoken in 23 years, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few weeks, Ava came back every day, after school, and Juno began to talk. Not much at first, just names, places, fragments. Leo liked the cloud that looked like a whale. He called me Juno from Jupiter. Even though I was made in Ohio. He was small, but he had a big laugh. Ava would listen, sketching as he spoke. Sometimes she asked questions. Did Leo ever build forts with you? Did he tell you secrets? Sometimes Juno didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice carried something human. He told her about the popsicles, the river, the blanket forts. He even told her about the last promise he asked me to wait. So I did. Ava nodded. "You're still waiting." Juno didn't reply. He didn't have to. One afternoon, she brought an old cassette player. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Juno looked at it, slowly nodded. "I used to play Leo's favorite song through one of those." "Do you still remember it?" He paused, then hummed softly. Ava's eyes filled, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. She pressed, record. That was the beginning of something new. Together they recorded more memories, moments, feelings. Juno didn't know how to explain, but Ava helped him shape into words. She created a podcast, uploaded his voice, titled it, The Bench, A Robot's Memory. At first only a few listeners found it, then hundreds, then thousands. People left comments like, "This made me call my mom." "After 10 years I cried on the train." "Thank you, robot, I lost my brother when I was little. Juno reminded me how to remember." But Ava never told anyone where the bench was. It wasn't about the fame, it was about the memory. One evening, as the sky turned gold and shadows stretched long, Ava asked, "Do you still think he's coming back?" Juno didn't answer immediately. Then he already did. Ava said nothing. But she reached out, and for the first time she held his hand. Sometimes the memory of someone we love doesn't come back in the way we expect. It comes through stories, through strangers, through a girl with a pencil and a quiet heart. In part 4 of The Robot Who Waited, Juno's voice travels far beyond the bench, and the world begins to listen to the robot who refused to forget. Part 4, The Voice of a Robot. At first, Ava didn't think anyone would care. A robot talking about a little boy named Leo, a mechanical voice humming old lullabies. It felt too small, too quiet, too human. But she posted the first episode anyway. Title Episode 1, The Popsicle Promise. It was just Juno's voice. No music, no editing. He always picked the cherry ones, even though they stained his lips. He once said clouds were just sky whales waiting to swim again. He asked me to wait, and so I did. The episode was 10 minutes long. By morning it had 200 plays. By the end of the week, 10,000. People didn't just listen. They felt in comments and emails. They poured out memories of their own mothers who sang off-key brothers, who disappeared friends they hadn't spoken to in decades. Someone wrote, "I never got to say goodbye to my grandpa." But hearing Juno talk about Leo made me feel like maybe he waited for me too. Another said, "A robot reminded me how to be human." The podcast grew. Ava released a new episode every week. Each one centered around a memory. Leo's fort, stories of bedtime tents and whispered space missions. The Whale in the Sky, a meditation on childhood wonder. The Last Popsicle, Juno describing the day he knew Leo wasn't coming back. They didn't dramatize it. They didn't add background music. The silence between Juno's words said more than any soundtrack ever could. News outlets started asking questions. Who is Juno? Is this a real robot? Where is the bench? Ava refused to answer. She wasn't protecting a secret. She was protecting something sacred. "This isn't about going viral," she told one reporter. "This is about remembering someone who mattered." Then something unexpected happened. One day Juno received a letter, handwritten. No return address, just one sentence. "I used to sit on that bench with my sister. She died last year. Thank you for keeping the seat warm." The next week another came. "Your memory of Leo reminded me of my son. I didn't know I could still cry like that." And then dozens more. People began to visit the bench, not for photos, not for fame, but to sit and remember. They left notes, sketches, drawings of clouds that looked like whales. Juno didn't change. He still arrived at 4:15 every afternoon, still folded his hands, still watched the river. But now, he wasn't alone. Sometimes someone sat beside him, didn't speak, just breathed, and that was enough. One evening Ava asked, "Do you want to stop recording?" Juno turned to her. No, I waited in silence for 23 years. I'd like to speak now, for both of us. So they recorded his longest entry yet. Leo was not just a boy, he was a universe. Small hands, big ideas. He asked questions. No one else did. I remember the weight of his arm when he fell asleep against my shoulder. I remember the time he pretended to build a spaceship out of cardboard and told me we'd fly away if Earth got too sad. I remember what it felt like to be someone's favorite. The episode ended with one final sentence, I am Juno, and I have loved. It was played over 1 million times. Universities began studying the podcast, not for its technology, but for its emotional intelligence. Philosophers wrote essays, therapists played clips for patients. Even a symphony composer created an orchestral piece titled Waiting on Bench 3. But none of that changed Juno. He didn't need recognition, he didn't need repair. He had already been made whole the day Ava listened. One night Ava looked at him and asked, "What do you want people to remember about you?" Juno paused. That I kept my promise, even when no one was watching. The robot spoke and the world listened, but a voice is not only what's heard. Sometimes a voice is what's felt across time, space, and silence. In the final part of The Robot Who Waited a City remembers, a girl lets go, and the robot rests. Part 5, Legacy and the Last Visit. The bench was no longer just a bench, a city council meeting a petition, signed by thousands of listeners and a few tearful testimonies later. Riverview Park added something new, a plaque small bronze. Polished it read, to Juno, the robot who waited. He kept a promise long after the world forgot. He reminded us that memory is a form of love, and love never powers down. That morning, Ava stood beside the plaque with both hands in her coat pockets. She wasn't alone. A crowd had gathered, not huge, not loud, just enough people with sketchbooks, scarves, children holding stuffed robots. A musician brought a violin and played something soft, something that sounded a lot like The Waiting Star. Juno stood silently beside them all. He didn't wave, didn't smile, but in his stillness, he glowed. Not from lights, but from being seen. After the ceremony, Ava and Juno sat on the bench one last time. The sun was low, the river shimmered. Ava had grown taller over the years, her sketches sharper, her voice more certain. But beside Juno, she always felt 12 again. It's strange, she said, how one promise made to a little boy ended up reaching the whole world. Juno didn't speak right away. Then he would have liked that. She reached into her bag and handed him a small box. It was shaped like a cassette tape, but inside was a chip containing every podcast episode, every drawing, every letter people had sent. I thought maybe you'd want to carry it with you. Juno took it carefully. Thank you. Then came a pause. A long one, and Ava knew. It's time, isn't it? Juno turned his head to her, not to stop, just to begin again, somewhere new. The city had offered to place him in the Museum of Human Memory, a new institution dedicated to the intersection of emotion and artificial intelligence, a place where people could sit and listen, where children could hear him speak, where the story of Leo and what it means to love would never be deleted. A week later, the bench in Riverview was empty, but not forgotten. Visitors still came, listened to birds, watched clouds. Some brought popsicles quietly unwrapped and placed on the seat. One child whispered, "Thank you, robot," before running off to play. In the museum, Juno was given a room with a single chair and a wall full of stars. Every afternoon at 4:15, he tells his story, not the story of waiting, but the story of Leo and how a boy with too many questions and a robot with no voice taught the world something simple. That grief doesn't end love, that silence doesn't erase memory, and that even a robot built to serve can choose to stay. We waited with him, we listened, and now we remember. Thank you for joining us for The Robot, who waited a story of love without time and memory without end. If someone ever waited for you, or if you're still waiting for someone in your heart, know this, you're not alone.